Welcome back to this edition of Grizzlies Daily. I'm your host, Malik, and yes, it has been a while. Haven't been with the daily persona lately, but I do have a valid excuse. Basically, was on trip for a business trip, and my laptop essentially got destroyed at TSA, shot at Nashville Airport. That was fun. So I've been out of commission for a few days, but we are back. We got a little makeshift setup going on until I get my computer fixed, which hopefully isn't too far gone from now. But yeah, so if you see this weird little setup and me looking up, it's because I have everything connected to a monitor. So that's how we doing this right now, because my screen is essentially shattered. So we gotta do it the makeshift way, but I knew I had to get this content out to y'all because we actually got the schedule released yesterday for the NBA season. And I'm looking at it right here. Some notable games. The Grizzlies start the season off at home against New Orleans. They start with a 3-game homestand. Starts it appears October 22nd against New Orleans, and then followed up 2 days later against Miami, and then a back-to-back with Indiana. And then they hit the road to face Golden State, Phoenix, and then come back home against the Lakers on Halloween. And honestly, the way I feel about the schedule, it starts off kind of tough. I'll be honest, it starts off kind of tough. But if we're being real, I am not totally against it. If you don't know, also something to point out, the Grizzlies do have 10 primetime games. So that's, I guess that's always something very interesting part to say. But wanted to kind of touch on the back-to-back parts. So I don't know what really went into the schedule, but I'm looking at it right now. Someone actually pointed it out. Steven Adams Stats on Twitter. The number of back-to-back games for each team, the Grizzlies have 14. That's the same amount as Orlando, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and Houston. 16 is the most, and we have, it looks about 16 teams have 16 back-to-backs this year, which is very interesting because it felt like the league was, after a while, steering away from back-to-backs, but it seems like they're bringing that back now. Really don't know the whole mentality behind that, but I found that very, very interesting, to say the least. 13 back-to-back games. That's like 26 games in a row in total. It's not, well, that's just assuming it's just 2 games in a row, not somehow 3, but I believe it's just 2 in a row. Very interesting, though. And honestly, it's kind of something really to think about, because we've said the Grizzlies need to prioritize health. So that's something that really just needs to be worried about, and that really is gonna get this training staff, gonna test them. And it's like, hey, got to get these guys healthy, got to make sure the guys are training right, things like that, because the last thing we want is a year like 2023 where we dealt with a lot of injuries. So very interesting perspective. 10 primetime games, with obviously starting against the Lakers. One thing to note is majority of these games appear to be on Prime Video. If you don't know, the Amazon Prime essentially is part of the NBA now, and it has its course as for showing games. Don't really know how I feel about it. I do know that NBC and Peacock are also in the mix. Grizz have 1 game on NBC by the looks of it, and then a few on Peacock, and then 3 on ESPN. Now, one thing to note is this is all subject to change. We've seen games be flexed, so it's just something to note that is subject to change, and I don't want to lead you all in the wrong path and then things change. We've seen it before, and we've obviously seen times where, the Grizzlies do have games where they weren't initially prime time, and then they turn prime time. It's just a matter of how the league feels and how good the Grizzlies are playing. So that's just something to know right there. Now, something I really want to get into. The schedule, in my opinion, starts off a little hard, but it's not difficult to me. I think it comes off kind of easy. But there's a stretch in this. There's a stretch in this where it essentially gets so tough for the Grizzlies. So Like I said, the Grizzlies start the season off New Orleans, Miami, Indiana. To me, right there, I think the Grizzlies can easily start the year off 3-0. They started the year off 3-0. Charlotte, I mean, New Orleans, I mean, I just feel like that's a team that we can beat. Miami, I do feel like the Grizzlies can beat that team, and I definitely do think they can beat Indiana. Obviously, no Tyrese Halliburton, no Miles Turner. Obviously, that'll be a J Huff homecoming game right there. But I do think the Grizzlies can start 3-0, especially at home, because the Grizzlies too seem to play better at home. Then they face Golden State and Phoenix on the road. I do think I think Golden State will be a bit of a challenge, although Golden State isn't really that much better of a team, so that'll be something to check out. And then you start off with, then you go to Phoenix, which I do think the Grizzlies can absolutely win because Phoenix is nowhere near the same team that they are, and even then that team is struggling. But that's not the main purpose of this. There is a stretch right after that Phoenix game where we talk about the Grizzlies really going through one of the toughest stretches I've seen from any team when looking at schedules. So on Halloween, they play the Lakers. That is the first game of the NBA Cup. Then they go on the road against Toronto. That's going to be an easy game right there. Then here's a back-to-back. They face Detroit at home. Then they get a little bit of a rest, and then they face Houston. Then they face Dallas and OKC all at home. Then they go on the road for a 4-game stretch where they play the Knicks, the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Spurs. That is a 10-game stretch between Halloween and November 18th. This is probably one of the most insane stretches of games I've seen a team have just when looking at the schedules. If there's some else that are really competitive, please let me know. This tweet was from Grizzly Season. They really pointed it out for me. It says predict their record. I got to be honest, looking at this, just the games that I think are, easy to win or a little easier to win. I think Toronto is a gimme game. I do believe Dallas is not necessarily a gimme, but I do think it's an easier game by any means. Then you have the Spurs. I do think that's a little less of a challenge than compared to the other teams. But if I got to be honest, if the Grizzlies can finish above 500 on this stretch right here, I'd have no complaints. Obviously, in real time, it's going to be frustrating to see the losses, but when you really put it into perspective, especially as the season goes on and how it starts out, like I said, new system, new coach, essentially a new core, you really have to put into perspective that, you're looking at best case scenario, and with this schedule, it does really, put it into perspective like, hey, this team does have a bit of work to do before come All-Star break and things like that. It's a lot of things that go into it. Sorry, y'all. Sorry about that. I just had dinner. So, yeah, it's a really, really, really tough stretch, and I do think if best case scenario, the Grizzlies get lucky and they end up, unscathed with something like that, because that is one of the toughest stretches I've seen. Now, real quick, NBA Cup schedule, if anybody cares, it did release right here. I have it pulled up. Like I said, it starts on Halloween, West Group B. For the Grizzlies, they're included in it. It starts Halloween against the Lakers at home. That'll be on Prime Video. Then the next game is November 7th against the Mavericks. And then November 26th on the road against the Pelicans. And then November 28th also on the road, but this time against the Clippers. And that's basically, that rounds out the NBA Cup right there. I really don't have any thoughts when it comes to the NBA Cup. At the end of the day, the only championship that matters to me is the NBA championship, because the NBA essentially doesn't have a eye-catching incentive for winning the NBA Cup, and that really right there is the deal breaker for me and caring about it that much. Otherwise, if the Grizzlies don't make it past in the NBA Cup, I'm not going to trip over it. I mean, that's just, something to make things a little more, entertaining in the league. Now, don't get me wrong, it is entertaining, but as far as the talent, how the season goes, I'm not too big on it. Now, something that I did see that really caught my interest, and I have it pulled up right here. Um, Tony Allen went on. I have it pulled up right here in my notes. I'm so sorry, y'all. We like I told y'all, we doing it. We're doing it in a very interesting way that I haven't done in Lord knows how long. But basically, I have it right here. Basically, Tony Allen, Grizzlies legend, he said that he's seen Jaren Jackson Jr. Meeting with Celtics legend and potential. I believe he is a Hall of Famer. I could or future Hall of Famer. I'm sorry if I'm out of touch with that. But meeting with Kevin Garnett. So I personally am a fan of this because one thing that I will say that I wish Jaren did have much of is a more hungry mentality. I wish he did have more of that. Um, we've obviously seen this kind of thing happen with Jaren. Where he's good, but his mentality, his hunger, it doesn't really show on the court. But working with guys like Tony Allen, it really does help. And actually, I'm just not reading this right now. Garnett is actually a mentor for Jackson because Jaren Jackson received comparisons to Kevin Garnett. And it's no surprise to me, look at defense and then outside perimeter shooting. It makes sense. So, it's not really much to it. Just very good thing to see that Jaren is really working this year. And Jaren has also always been someone that has worked in the off season. So it really doesn't surprise me that he's working with a guy like Kevin Garnett, because one thing about Jaren Jackson Jr., you are going to see him working off season. I've seen him working with Nas Reed and I believe Karl Anthony Towns. Just, he's always working. I see him in pro-am runs. Chris Brinkley, I believe. I said Brinkley. Chris Brickley. And then just, on his own with this trainer, Chris Johnson, stuff like that. So it's good to see Jaren Jackson Jr. constantly working on his game. And obviously we hope to see that, Triple J can have another all-star and even all-NBA caliber year this year. Like I said, because without Desmond Bane now, he's going to be asked to do a lot more than what he usually does. And I do feel like Jaren can take on the challenge of that. So I'm very happy to see where Jaren goes from here. And obviously him working with guys like Kevin Garnett, because one thing about it, Kevin Garnett has been big on the Grizzlies, and that's something that I've always been a fan of right there. So very good. Glad to see it, and I can't wait to see how this works out for Jaren, because I do think he can develop into a player that we look back on and are like, he turned into a very good talented player. But yeah, that's really all I got for this edition of Grizzlies Daily right there. Obviously, schedule comes out. We'll talk more. We'll go more depth into it as days go by. As you know, the season approaches. We are just literally 2 months out from preseason starting, so can't wait to get to it. Really appreciate y'all for sticking with me. Like I said, this is the setup for right now until I get things handled. So just bear with me. If y'all like the setup where I'm looking up and things like that, make sure to let me know. If not, I'll try to figure something out. But if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you always notified when we upload right here on Grizzlies Daily. And that's for this edition. My name is Melek, and I'll see you all in the next one.